philosophy, ground rules, and the Jewish understanding of why we keep dietary laws. What are the dietary laws all about? How does it affect the person who keeps it? How does it affect the person who does not keep it? All these questions we're going to discuss tonight. But before we get into the actual understanding of kashrut, we have to understand that the Torah's mitzvot, which kashrut is one of, fall into actually three categories. As we see in the question of the wise son that we recite in the Pesach Haggadah, the wise son asks, "Ma ha'edot v'achokim v'mishpatim asher tzivah Eloheinu etchem?" What are the testimonials, statutes, and laws that Hashem our God commanded you? All of the Torah, all the mitzvot of the Torah fall into three categories. They're either what's called edot, testimonials, which are certain mitzvot that we do as testimony to some kind of truth, like Shabbat, like Tefillin, like the holidays. Those are called testimonials, edot, because they testify the very thing we're coming to convey with our actions. Then there's a second type of mitzvot in the Torah. Those are called the chokim. The chokim are the statutes, like, for example, that you can't wear linen and wool together. That's called shatnez, kilaim. Is there an explanation to these laws? No, there isn't. Well, there was no explanation given to us. They're called laws because they're like decrees that a king bestows on his constituents, and we keep them because God told us to do it, specifically without looking for reasons. Are there reasons behind it? Certainly. But they were given to us in such a way where we have to keep them without even it being clear to us as to why. And this is actually the category under which kashrut falls into. Kashrut, with all of its laws, falls into the second category of chokim, that are not meant to make sense to the normal person, even though they make a lot of sense in retrospect. And the last category is mishpatim, laws. These are civil laws. These are the type of laws, for example, that if you steal, then you have to pay a penalty. You have to pay twice the amount. If you damage somebody's property, you have to pay. These are civil laws which make sense, which even if the Torah would not have been given, we would have known these through common sense. Meaning even someone who did not have exposure to the Torah can reach the civil laws in the Torah just by using the common sense brain. Obviously there's more to that. The Torah offers a lot more than just common sense, but they appeal to the common sense. Whereas the laws, the chukim, the second type, don't really appeal to the common sense in first sight. That's the difference between the second type of mitzvot and the third type of mitzvot. So basically, all the mitzvot fall into these three categories. Everything in the Torah, out of the 613 mitzvot, either fall into the categories of testimonials, or statutes, or laws. But kashrut falls under the second category, chokim. When it comes to the kashrut laws, many people might think, well, it's disgusting, the foods which the Torah makes forbidden on us are disgusting, and I would not eat it even if the Torah did not command us to. This is actually the wrong approach when looking at things. The rabbis tell us, Al yomar adam, a person should not say, I don't like pig. It disgusts me. It makes me sick. Ela ipshi. No, but rather, I think it's great. It's yummy. It smells good. Every time I walk by the restaurant, I smell it. It smells good. That should be the approach. But what can I do? That this is what my Father in heaven decreed on me. Meaning, when it comes to eating pig, for example, the rabbis tell us, which is chokim, we shouldn't think that we're doing it because it makes sense to us, because it's maybe not healthy, because it's disgusting. No. We should know that the reason we do it is because Hashem said. That's the only reason. We should think that we would like to have eaten pig if it wasn't for Hashem's commandment. But the only thing preventing us from eating it is no other than the fact that Hashem commanded. That's what makes it a chok. That's what makes it, like we said, statute, which is really doesn't have to make sense. But, like we said in retrospect, many things in the Torah, even the chukim, which appear maybe not to make sense, make a lot of sense after you search for reason. Are we allowed to investigate and look for reasons in the Torah? Yes. But the rabbi tells you have to know that it's never limited to your capacity to reason. Meaning if a mitzvah seems to unexplainable, irrational, illogical, then you should know that it's you who cannot comprehend the depth of it, but it's not the mitzvah. We're allowed to look for reasons for mitzvot, but we always have to know that doesn't sum up the entirety of the mitzvah. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about keeping kashrut is that the reason we keep kashrut is because it's healthy. Even within the realm of reason, even though we said that keeping kashrut is a chok, is a statute without a reason, but the reason that people attribute to keeping kashrut is the fact that they think it's healthy. And this couldn't be farther from the truth. Because really, kashrut and health, they might overlap, but it is not, by no means a reason and a basis to keep kashrut for health reasons. In fact, many foods that are healthy, the Torah forbids. And we don't see people getting sick from eating non-kosher food. So the health reason for keeping kashrut is really not at all the reason why it may be. Is it healthy to eat kashrut? It may be, but that doesn't mean that it's the reason. Torah tells us what the reason is. After listing all the non-kosher animals, the Torah writes, Ki ani Hashem Elohechem v'hitkadashtem, and you shall make yourself holy, v'hitem kedoshim, and become holy, ki kadosh ani. Meaning, refraining from eating non-kosher food, the Torah tells us, is a part of kedusha. Kedusha means holiness. Kadosh in Hebrew means someone who is separated, someone who is not indulging in everything and anything that this world has to offer. People who pull away from the material world to some extent and are able to elevate it to spiritual planes are called holy people. We don't believe in nuns. We don't believe in priests who don't get married, who don't have any physical pleasures. That's not what holy means. Holy means it's just that we make our physical existence in this world something spiritual. And as Jews, our goal is to be kadosh. Why ki kadosh? Because Hashem is holy. If you want to be like me, Hashem says. And by the way, we know that in spirituality, the more you are alike something else, the more similar you are, the closer you are to that thing. In spirituality, closeness is not like in the physical world, how distant two bodies are apart. In spirituality, closeness is resemblance. Meaning the more we resemble God, the closer we are to God. In many ways, it's like that also between a man and a woman. The more they become alike each other, they adapt each other's traits, the closer they are. Because in spirituality, closeness is resemblance. So Torah says, Ki kadosh ani. God is holy. You want to be close to God, you want to be holy, eat kosher food. Meaning, the Torah is concerned about our spiritual health, not about our physical health when it comes to eating kosher. It's our soul over here who is at stake, not our bodies. Kadosh. You want to be kadosh, you want to have any touch to holiness, you have to refrain from these foods, the Torah tells us. So, the point of keeping kosher, Torah tells us, is again, not health, not physical health, spiritual health. And we'll talk about that. What does kosher food do to your spiritual soul, and what does non-kosher food do to it? In another pasuk, the Torah tells us right afterwards, after stating again all the non-kosher animals, Ki ani Hashem ma'aleh etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. Usually the Torah, when describing the Exodus, uses the word hamotzi etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, God who took you out of Egypt. But in this specific pasuk, the Torah tells us who elevated you out of Egypt. The rabbis tell us it's not a coincidence. Why? Because giving us the kosher laws was meant to actually as a means to elevate us above all the other nations. To be able to become, like we said, holy people. The as we shall see in a second. So you might think, well, it's kind of unfair. You're saying the kosher laws are meant to elevate us. We haven't gotten to how exactly they achieve this purpose. But you would have thought that this is actually constricting us and restricting us, and this is actually something that you wouldn't want to do to a guest. If you invited somebody to your home, you said, listen, you can't eat from this salad, you can't eat from this meat, you can only eat from this tray over there. It looks like you're discriminating against him. You're limiting their choices. So why don't we think that by Hashem saying, well, out of all the animals, you guys can only have these types of animals, and in this manner. This is like putting 80% of what's out on the market forbidden for us. And within that 20%, saying, well, you have to do it exactly this manner, and you can't mix certain things. This seems like we're actually being discriminated against, and it doesn't seem fair. But the Torah tells us, alludes to it in this word, and the rabbis tell us, when it comes to introducing the whole kosher idea, the Torah says, Dabur b'nei Israel in Leviticus 13. Dabur b'nei Israel emor zot ha'chaya shetochelu mikol ha'behema she'aretz. This is the animal which you can eat from all the animals on the earth. The Torah chose the word chaya. The rabbis tell us, even though we're talking about domesticated animals and not wild animals, because the word chaya comes from the word chayim. The rabbis tell us that when it comes to kosher laws, it was given to us not to limit us, but it's because we're considered living. What does that mean? The rabbis give a parable to understand this. There were once two people. One, they both came to the same doctor. One of them was detected as terminally ill. And the doctor wrote a prescription, said, let him have everything he wants to eat. The other patient came in, and the doctor gave him a diagnosis, and he said, listen, this you cannot eat. You got to watch your sugar, you got to watch your oil, you can only eat fish, you can't eat meat. These two people walked out. Time later, the one who was terminally ill passed away, and the one who was a little bit sick came back full to life, came back to life. And everybody asks, well, the doctor, why did you give the first patient who passed away anything he wanted to eat? And why did you give the second patient only certain things? The doctor said, well, the first patient, I saw he had no signs of life. So if he's got no signs of life, have everything. There's no point to hold back. But the second patient, I saw signs of life, cha'im. And therefore, I gave him a strict diet so he can actually keep living. So to the rabbis tells when it comes to the kosher laws. The difference between the Jewish people and the nations is on some level we're cha'im, we're living spiritually. We have a spiritual capacity that others don't. And because we have this spiritual capacity, Hashem saw it fit to keep us and give us certain restrictions that would enable us to actually grow and develop our spiritual capacity to a point where we can achieve the fullest potential of life a human being can achieve on this earth, which is, like we said, kedusha, holiness. And so this, yes, put a lot of things are forbidden for us, but it's for our sake, because those things actually make you sick. How do they make you sick? Like we said, not physically, but they make you sick spiritually, as we shall see in a second. How does the non-kosher food, like in the parable, make you sick? How is it that if you eat something that's not kasher, then in some way it makes you deficient, in some way it harms you, it hinders you? Torah tells us, Al tishaketzu nafshotechem, do not defile your souls, v'chol hasheretz hashoretz, with all the insects who crawl, v'lo titameu bahem, and do not defile yourself, v'nitmetem bam, and become defiled. Meaning, we have the concept of tum'ah. This concept of tum'ah is impurity, is not a physical concept where something is dirty, but it's spiritual impurity. Tanna of Rabbi Shmuel tells us, what is this all about? Al tikre v'nitmetem bam. Do not read in the pasuk v'nitmetem bam, defile yourself. Ela v'nitamtem bam. You shall become, like we say in Hebrew, metumtam, atum, sealed off. The spiritual impurity is like building a membrane on your soul and not enabling it to actually tune in to spiritual matters. It becomes as if a shell that doesn't let God's spiritual light penetrate into the human soul. We know that God's light is spiritual, and we know that we are receptacles. The whole wisdom of Kabbalah is talking about receiving, how to be able to connect to God, to receive God's light. Torah tells us, Rabbi Yishmael tells us, a person who eats non-kosher food doesn't have this capacity anymore. He cannot comprehend holiness, cannot comprehend concepts of truth and ethics in a way that a person who is careful about what he eats can. V'nitmetem bam, v'nitamtem bam. He becomes like closed off, completely closed off, unable to understand, unable to sense, and have the spiritual sensitivity to relate to spiritual matters. I'd like to do that again, sorry. Sorry. Didn't work last time. The parable is that the rabbis give is like a person who listens to very, very loud and noisy music. After a long time listening to very loud music, a person's hearing is impaired. Now there's a twofold. First of all, the person loses the ability to appreciate and to understand very, very sudden, very, very fragile and sensitive tunes. Just hearing is just not there anymore. A person who's been working with trucks and working outside in very noisy areas loses the capacity to appreciate and to listen to music and be able to see the little nuances within the music. And not only that, he loses the ability to know that he's at a loss. I mean, there's some people, for example, in some synagogues, you have people who've got great voices, people in the crowd, who can join in the cantor at any given time and pick up the tunes. They just have an ear for it. And there are some people who it seems like as if they're listening to something else. Their voice is not only their voice is so horrible, but they love to sing. This is a twofold. They love to sing, but their voice is horrible, and they can't even pick up on the tune. How worse can it be? You don't want to be stuck in this situation, believe me. But the funny thing is that these people don't know this. You would think that, wow, this person's voice is so loud and awful. Can't he understand that he's going the other way? No. Some of these people don't understand that they don't have a musical ear. They love to sing. So to a person who eats non-kosher food becomes tameh, impure. Impure does not mean dirty, but the person becomes, so to speak, unable to understand that what holiness is, and not even feel their own loss. I mean, it's one thing when you know that you're lost something and you don't have it. You can always try to work at getting it. But if you don't even know you lost something, then you're at a double loss. That's what tum'ah does to a person. Tum'ah is from the Hebrew word atum. Atum is completely closed off, unable to understand anything, unable to comprehend and relate and have the sensitivity of holinesses. Meaning a person can actually live life biologically and not reach their spiritual potential and actually be like a sophisticated animal with good civil manners, but no more than that. That's what tum'ah is. Tum'ah is taking away the ability. It is making a person spiritually deficient, if you want to put it in that. Spiritually deficient to grow in spirituality. So tum'ah means atum in Hebrew. And that's what non-kosher does to the soul. It doesn't blemish the body, it blemishes the soul. A story is told about a big rabbi by the name of Elisha ben Avuyah. Elisha ben Avuyah was one of the rabbis who lived at the time of the Mishnah. He was the mentor of Rabbi Meir. And he's one of the rabbis who historically, tragically, became became a heretic. How did this happen? And Ma tells us a story that one day he was walking and he saw a young kid walking up the ladder, following his father's instructions. And the kid went to fulfill a mitzvah of sending away the mother bird, as the Torah says, Shiloh Haken. And as he was walking up, as he fulfilled the mitzvah, he fell off the ladder and died. And Elisha ben Aviah said, wait a second. The only two mitzvot in the Torah that the Torah promises longevity, long life, is kibud av v'em, is honoring your parents, which he did. And second, shiloh haken, leman yarichun yamecha. And he died after he did these two mitzvot. He said it doesn't make sense. And he left everything. And he became a heretic. So it tells us he was even riding a horse on Shabbat when it was Yom Kippur, when his student Rabbi Meir was escorting him. The Gemara looks for different reasons how this came about. Obviously, many people have challenges in emunah. Many people are challenged in life when they see things, how to explain them. But not many people walk away because of isolated incidents. Gemara says this started way before. What happened to Elisha ben Aviah and what he encountered just pushed him off. But his instability started way before. Actually, in the cause of it, the Gemara identifies when he was even in his mother's womb. The Gemara says that when his mother passed by idolatrous houses where they were cooking food for the pagan gods, the mother one time smelt it. Some say she even had something to taste because she was pregnant, and this taste went into her like venom into a person's body, and it affected the child. Because he had exposure to non-kosher food, even though it was from his mother, the Gemara says that this stayed in his system as a type of impurity. The Zohar HaKadosh says that the biggest damage, biggest harm in eating non-kosher food, again, is not the physical, but there's ruach tum'ah. There's a spiritual, impure ruach, spirit that resides on a person when they eat non-kosher food. So even though he didn't eat it, his mother ate it, but it was there. And it was just enough to make things harder for him. The Rambam, who lived 900 years ago, there's a story about Maimonides who went to visit Yemen. His big visit to Yemen. Over there, he was introduced to one of the great scholars who lived there, and this great scholar stayed in touch with Maimonides when Maimonides went back to his country and corresponded with letters. And it said that in one of the letters, he wrote something. He had a big question in emunah, big question about God, and the question was so, let's just say, so dangerous or so uncommon that Maimonides decided not to even address the question. He didn't write him back. But this scholar kept writing back time after time until Maimonides said he saw